Welcome to this edition of Creamer Media's Polity. I'm Martin Joaquin in Johannesburg. Joining me is political analyst Aubrey Machiki. He is going to be sharing his thoughts on the upcoming local government elections. Welcome to the show, Aubrey. Aubrey, you seem to be convinced that the show of support we saw in the EFF's manifesto launch will not necessarily translate into votes for the party come election day. Why is that so?
Well, I have not taken a position either way. All I'm cautioning against is the assumption that if a political party attracts many people, big crowds, to its manifesto launch and subsequent pre-election gatherings, that is necessarily a sign that such a party is going to emerge as the front runner in elections. For instance, in this case, both the DA and the ANC failed to attract the kinds of numbers they were talking about prior to their manifesto launches. And if we take that and we make assumptions about how the DA and the ANC will perform, and therefore how the EFF, which filled the Orlando Stadium, will perform, our assumption is that would be that the party that will attract the most votes will be the EFF on August 3. Whereas I was told a story by an old Prog about the 1961 election. And in the story, he says that in that election, the pre-election meetings of the Progressive Party were full to the rafters. In fact, there was no standing room for even the keynote speakers. But he ends the story by saying, well, Aubrey, we won the meetings, but lost the election. So that's what I'm cautioning against, that you may win the meetings, but that may not always be an indicator of how well a party will perform in the election itself.
What about the issues that Julius Malema raised, bread and butter issues? Surely they resonate with the constituents that he is targeting. One would think that this would earn him votes come election day.
Well, you know, if you look at the EFF, I think the EFF is going to be a headache for both the ANC and the DA. If you look at Nelson Mandela Bay, the EFF, yes, will be a headache, but less so for the DA. Because if our assessment is correct and that the ANC is most probably going to lose Nelson Mandela Bay, the possibility is that no party is going to win an outright majority in Nelson Mandela Bay. And therefore, the EFF and the DA might be part of a coalition arrangement in Nelson Mandela Bay, possibly with the United Democratic Movement. So in Nelson Mandela Bay, the EFF, yes, will be a headache to both the ANC and the DA, but less so for the DA because it might be part of a coalition arrangement with the DA. Outside Nelson Mandela Bay, given the fact that the DA has argued that it will win an outright majority in Nelson Mandela Bay, Ekurhuleni, Tshwane, and Johannesburg, the extent it achieves that, or actually the extent it does not achieve that, will depend on the number of votes which flow away from the ANC, but not in enough numbers towards the Democratic Alliance, simply because a portion of those votes has gone towards the EFF. And you are right. The reason why some of those votes may flow towards the EFF is because the EFF has been quite clear about the weaknesses of the ANC, to some extent at the expense of the DA. For instance, when it comes to the link between race and disadvantage or advantage, race and economic advantage or disadvantage, I think the EFF has been less ambiguous or more forthright than the DA. The DA has been trying to be all things to all races when it comes to its messages with regard to redress, whereas the EFF has been quite clear about the fact that race, particularly if you are black, still remains a main or one of the main indicators of disadvantage in South Africa. While in 2013, the DA comes to the same conclusion, that race remains the main indicator of disadvantage in South Africa. Since then, the DA, in an attempt to hold on to its traditional support base and at the same time attract a sizable chunk of black voters going forward, has been ambiguous in its messaging as far as redress is concerned. And I suspect that the party that will benefit more from that ambiguity is the EFF and not the ANC. But also, both the DA and the EFF are attacking the ANC at two levels. Firstly, the growing image crisis of the leader of the ANC, Jacob Zuma, and therefore an attempt on their part to have that image crisis cause collateral damage to the image of the party itself. So that's the first strategy. The second strategy is to attack the performance of the ANC, in this case, in the local state, in the hope that the cumulative impact of both perceptions of underperformance or the reality of underperformance of the ANC in the local state and the collateral damage that may be caused by the image crisis of Jacob Zuma will benefit either the EFF or the Democratic Alliance or both. My own assessment is that it will benefit more the EFF than it will the Democratic Alliance.
Aubrey, you seem to be convinced that the ANC will retain metros like Tshwane, Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni, but that it might not win Port Elizabeth. Obviously, this raises the possibility of coalitions. Is a coalition between any of the three biggest parties likely, given their ideological differences?
Well, you know, what has happened in previous local government elections, you have had party leaders or certain party leaders pronouncing before an election that they will not go into a coalition with a particular party, which in my view is foolish, because the configuration of a coalition is determined by election outcomes or the election result. Until you have the election result, you cannot say which party you refuse to go into coalition with, because the result may be such that you may have to go into coalition with the devil, or what you consider to be the devil. Of the four metropolitan areas, Ekurhuleni, Nelson Mandela Bay, Johannesburg and Tshwane, I am more certain that you will have a coalition arrangement in Nelson Mandela Bay than I am about the other three areas. I have not reached a stage where I do believe the contention of the Democratic Alliance that it will take the four metropolitan areas. I do believe, though, that it is quite possible that the ANC will suffer some serious erosion in electoral support in Tshwane, Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni, but not enough for the DA to cross the line and take those areas from the ANC. But at the same time, remember that we, as analysts and commentators, have been predicting for quite some time now, especially when it comes to local government elections, that the ANC will lose support significantly. And so far, that has not happened. So don't rule out the possibility that under certain circumstances, depending on how these campaigns are fought by both the DA and the Democratic Alliance, the ANC may surprise us in terms of the levels of support it garners during this local government election. But if current indicators and variables remain as they are until August 3, and if the levels of antipathy that ordinary South Africans are expressing, including those who previously have supported and have voted for the ANC should be trounced in this election.
If the EFF wins some of the municipalities, do you think it has got the capacity to govern, or would this be a recipe for disaster?
Well, I cannot think of a municipality that the EFF will win. Okay. So as much as I can see the EFF being part of coalition arrangements, even in places outside Nelson Mandela Bay. At the moment, I cannot think of a municipality that the EFF will govern on its own. But I cannot rule it out either, because a lot still has to happen in the unfolding of the election campaigns of the three dominant parties. In which case, if there is or there are municipalities that are won by the EFF, I do think that, to be fair, when the ANC took power in 1994, it didn't have experience to govern either. Was it ready to govern? Yes, it was ready to govern. Has it governed well? I think the picture is mixed. So the expectation will be the same for me, as far as the EFF is concerned, that despite the fact that they have not governed before, if they win an election in a particular municipality, they will be forced to be ready to govern.
Finally, I get the sense that you would rather not offer any predictions of the outcome of the August elections, but I would like you to do that for us.
Here's my concern. In 2009, there was an election in India, and all political commentators in India, analysts, political reporters, predicted that the Congress party would lose, and it won. If you look at the last Greek election, and you look at the Scottish referendum, again, voters went against the predictions of analysts and commentators. And it seems to me that voters globally seem intent on defying the expectations of people like me, analysts and commentators. And that is why I'm hesitant to give a categorical assessment of what each party will garner. The broad assessment I am prepared to give is that if you look at places like Gauteng, it seems to me that the voters in such places are becoming more strategic. So my expectation is that in Gauteng, voters will split their votes more and more going forward. And therefore, they'll be prepared to give most of their votes to the ANC at a national level, but less so at a provincial level, and even less so at a local government level. And if the levels of antipathy towards the ANC and the image crisis it faces at the moment, and if the crisis it seems to be experiencing in Nelson Mandela Bay at the moment, which is a crisis of confidence, if all of these things are anything to go by, the ANC should underperform in relation to the last local government election. And if it does, then the next question is who benefits more, the DA or the EFF? I will deal with this issue in the next column, the issue of the problems I see for the DA, because I think the DA has its own internal crisis at the moment, which means under Musi Maimane, it may underperform compared to its expectations, in which case I expect the EFF to outperform the DA in places where at the moment we don't think the EFF will do much better than the DA. But of course, we're talking a few months before an election. Ask me in 2 months' time, when we are clearer about the messaging and the strategies of the different parties, particularly the bigger parties. But another thing we will be clearer of is the position of the smaller parties. Because in a local government election, the smaller parties are much more important than they are in a provincial or national election. So the kingmakers here, actually, in many places, might just be those smaller parties.
Yes. That was political analyst Aubrey Macheki speaking to us about the upcoming local government elections.